chaos continues to erupt within the Trump administration, not just because of the scandals they create, but because of their complete inability to handle them. There's no clear strategy, no unified response, and no real leadership. As a result, we're witnessing an internal civil war within MAGA and the White House over how to address a growing list of crises. Two of the biggest issues fueling public outrage right now are Donald Trump's attack on Medicaid and the controversy surrounding Signalgate. These problems are spiraling out of control, and I can't wait to break them down with you. But before we dive in, if you could take a moment to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, it would mean a lot. Now, before we get into how these scandals are igniting a MAGA civil war, let's first get some context from Greg Casar, and then we'll take a look at something Donald Trump said recently.
I've been thinking about this a lot. There were plenty of things that I thought about Congress, and then I went, and it confirmed my fears. But there were some things that I learned new. And I think one of the most important things I learned anew is how so many of the most right-wing elected officials, great things, do not want services to work. And then they campaign on them being broken. They want to make political power. And that's a very, very purposeful strategy. When I was in a community hearing recently on oversight of the government, there was conversation about how sometimes Social Security staff would not answer enough of people's phone calls when they had questions. And there were inefficiencies there. And what many of the right-wing members of Congress advocated for then was slashing the budget of the Social Security Administration, which would then further create a deeper and deeper problem. And so what we need, in my view, I think we're kind of at the only at the bottom of that. What we need, in my view, is for people to deeply understand that there are people who break things and people who want to build. And building things and making things better is necessarily hard. It's much easier for me to smash this iPhone on the break. There's a lot of smart people to bring together. And so, when people feel like things are hard right now, why do we feel like people that break stuff get away with so much? It is, our job is inherently harder. It's harder, but it takes lots of good people to do it. And I think that the spirit of this country, as we face these hardest trials, hopefully, it creates a moment for us to recognize what it is we have built and what we have to build next.
I wanted to start with that clip from Congressman Greg Casar's town hall today, because this isn't just a Democratic talking point, it's the reality. Republicans are actively working to dismantle the programs that matter most to Americans. And that message resonates because people can see it for themselves. It's no secret that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to undermine Social Security and gut Medicaid. The evidence is right in front of us. Their entire approach to governing seems to be about breaking the system rather than improving it. Trump himself has even admitted as much. One clear example? His decision to rescind Elise Stefanik's nomination to the UN and his reasoning behind it.
You asked Representative Stefanik to stay in her seat. Can you explain your reason for that? Did it have anything to do with the tight polling in the Florida district that former Representative Waltz held?
Well, I think we're doing, I think we had, as you know, we have a few elections going on. And she is phenomenal, number one. She is a friend of mine, and she was going to go to the United Nations. And I said, look, there's a lot of room for doing that or something else. But she's very popular in her district, and I didn't want to take a chance. I don't even know who else is running. I assume somebody else would have been running. But if she runs, she can't be, you never want to say can't be beaten, but I think can't be beaten. She's very, very well-liked and very smart. And I said, Lise, would you do me a favor? We cannot take a chance. We have a slim margin. We don't want to take any chances.
With all of that in mind, the message Democrats are pushing, which is resonating with Americans, and Donald Trump's growing anxiety over what it could mean for upcoming special elections and his shrinking majority in Congress, it's clear that MAGA needs a response. But within the White House, there's no unified strategy. Instead, internal divisions are escalating, with competing ideas on how to handle the situation. And in the latest leak exposing these power struggles, it's obvious that things aren't going too well. In a leaked report to Axios, an anonymous White House official said, if we renew tax cuts for the rich paid for by throwing people off Medicaid, we are going to get effing slaughter. So there's obviously clear concern about how the administration's policies is playing out again. It's why I wanted to play that Stefanik clip, because Donald Trump is clearly worried about these special elections, but he's also worried about the midterms and whether Signalgate will be a defining story, and there's a couple of competing ideas of how they're going to address it. That's causing real problems within the White House, and I want to check that out first with a clip of JD Vance saying something that is just a complete lie, and that getting disproven in another leaked article.
And now the same American media that covered for the Biden administration after the untimely death and the unnecessary death of 13 brave Americans is really interested in forcing the President of the United States to fire someone because of a signal chat. That is not honest behavior from the American media. And if you think you're going to force the President of the United States to fire anybody, you've got another thing coming.
He'll be gone in a couple of weeks. Trump insiders predicting ouster over chat debacle with the anger over top Donald Trump officials participating in a Signal group chat discussing an attack on Yemen with journalists unintentionally invited to listen in. Not fading, some White House insiders are predicting an ouster is in the works, according to a report from Politico. On Wednesday, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and Vice President JD Vance met with Donald Trump in the Oval Office to counsel him on relieving National Security Advisor Mike Waltz of his duties for including the Atlantic editor and chief Jeffrey Goldberg to participate in their chat conversation, while there are calls from Democrats for Trump to fire Defense Secretary Pete Buttigieg for blabbing details about the attack in Yemen on Houthi rebels before it happened. It appears that it is Waltz, a former GOP House member, who is on the hot seat with Trump. The report notes that at the Wednesday meeting it was proposed that Waltz be shown the door. But there are fears among insiders that Trump will look weak for bowing to demands for someone to be fired, despite simmering anger directed at the National Security Advisor from inside the White House. Waltz still has the job 5 days after The Atlantic first published its explosive story on the Signal chat. That doesn't mean he's safe yet, according to the two people Politico is reporting, before adding, in fact, the two allies have heard some administration officials are just waiting for the right time to let him go, eager to be free of the news cycle before making changes. After reports about the meeting leaked, Vance rallied to Waltz's side by telling reporters, if you think you're going to force the President of the United States to fire anybody, you've got another thing coming. I'm the Vice President saying it here on Friday. We are standing behind our entire national security team. However, as Politico is reporting, Waltz's star has dimmed considerably after dragging the White House down. JD Vance is saying one thing in private meetings and something completely different to the media. Inside the Trump White House, there's an ongoing debate about whether to fire Mike Waltz. Trump doesn't want to, but at the same time, he kind of does. The agenda is falling apart. No one is on the same page, and leaks are spilling into the press, something Trump absolutely despises. Remember, Trump once said that leaking classified information, like the recent report about Elon Musk receiving U.S. war plans involving China, was a crime worthy of jail time. And yet his administration is now drowning in leaks, chaos, and infighting. This turmoil isn't new. It's always been the defining trait of Trump's leadership. The so-called soft MAGA Republicans used to justify their support by saying, I don't like Trump as a person. I don't like the chaos, but the economy. Well, now the economy is a mess, just like it was at the end of Trump's first term when he crashed it. And the chaos, it's still here. So what's left to like? The racism, the xenophobia, the bigotry. Maybe it's time for some people to just admit it. But one thing is certain, this is all backfiring on Trump, and Mark Kelly is making sure no one forgets.
What do you make of the lying? I really find this part, in some ways, some of the most unnerving. I mean, to say it's not classified, it's like, well, the timing and of a surprise.
I'm not even sure what they mean by that. Maybe they meant because it doesn't say secret or top secret on the signal chain.
Right, but of course it is.
Of course it is. It came off of a piece of paper that probably said top secret at the top, or he got it over the phone from the head of CENTCOM, the combatant commander, that said, here's, and by the way, you look at the times, it wasn't around a certain time. It's like 15:16, 3:16 p.m., or 14:10, which is 2:10 p.m. These are exact times that came from a plan. Now they're saying, well, these aren't war plans. I'll give them that. I mean, a war plan would be joint forces.
Sure, yeah.
It would include allies. This is a strike plan. These plans, by the way, are also planned by those pilots that are in the cockpit. So they planned the strike.
Right.
They communicated it to leadership. It got approved. And then the Secretary of Defense decides to throw it out on an unsecured platform, which, by the way, could have gotten to the Russians, could have gotten to the Iranians, and ultimately to the Houthis.
It also struck me that Jim Himes, Democratic congressman, said this the other day, that, like, there was no real reason to do it. That it was almost kind of showing off. Like, he didn't have to send that
100%.
way, right? Is that right?
Or he could have sent it afterwards.
Right.
If that would have come out 15 minutes after those airplanes got back to the aircraft carrier, those guys were safely aboard. If you want to send that stuff out, fine. That information is not valuable to anybody anymore, not really. But to do it beforehand is such a disservice to what these guys are about to do. And I'm confident, I'm sure their spouses are upset. It is risky to go fly an airplane into enemy territory and try to get bombs on target and then get out before you get shot down. And now you have the guy in the highest position in DOD is making that job potentially making that job so much harder for you.
There is reporting today that he's hired his brother at the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth,
To do,
liaison, I think, is what he's doing.
what's his brother's background?
I think he might have had a podcast company. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what it was.
This
is a guy who said he's going to bring Merritt back to the Department of Defense, fired the chair of the Joint Chiefs because he was too woke, I guess. Black man who talked about being black in America.
Yeah.
And do you think he's restoring merit to the Department of Defense?
With hiring his brother, who probably needed a job, or maybe gave him a raise from his previous job, or wants to have his brother around. How could his brother possibly be the most qualified job for whatever this is?
Democrats need to keep hammering this message home. No one wants a senile and chaotic president who is too preoccupied with Jeffrey Goldberg to fire Mike Waltz, even as our national security remains at risk because of it. This administration is too self-absorbed, too consumed by internal power struggles, and too caught up in its own dysfunction to make the right decisions. And they never will. As we discussed in the first leak, this chaos is going to cost them dearly if we show up and vote. That's why we talk about it every day on this show. If you want to support that, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and if you made it to the end, drop a heart in the comments. Until next time, I'll see you soon.